My mother stood up in the estate lawyer's office and slammed her hand on the desk. "You owe me everything," she said. 28 years. I raised this girl alone. Hand it over, or you are no longer my daughter. She was smiling. She had spent 28 years convincing me my father abandoned us. She had also forged my signature on a bank form and drained the $280,000 college trust he had quietly built for me. I had been paying down a $60,000 student loan because of it. She did not know I had just learned that. She did not know the lawyer knew. She did not know the man across the desk was holding a letter in my father's handwriting that was about to end her. I did not argue. I did not cry. I nodded. The lawyer set the letter down. My mother read the first line and staggered. If your chest is tight already, take a second to like and subscribe. It tells me you want to hear how this ends. Drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I love knowing where you are. I'm Bryn. I'm 32. This is the story of a letter that ended my mother's 28-year lie. Let me take you back to 1997. I grew up on a sentence. My mother said it the way other parents say grace. She said it on car rides and at the grocery store. She said it the first time I asked about my father and the 700th time. She said it the way you teach a language to a child too young to question it. Your father abandoned us, Bryn. He walked out when you were 4 years old. He never paid a dime. He never called. He never came back. That kind of man, you forget, you and me. We don't need him. That was the whole story of my father. For 28 years, that was the whole story. I am 32 years old now. I am a veterinarian at Maplebrook Animal Clinic in Stowe, Vermont. I live above a coffee shop. I drive a 2014 Subaru with 170,000 miles on it. I owe $60,000 in federal student loans. I pay them down the way other people pay rent, quiet, monthly, never late. I will be paying them down for another 9 years, if nothing changes. My mother, Joan Mercer, lives 40 minutes from me in Burlington. She is 60 years old. To the outside world, she is a hero. She has a Facebook with 4,200 followers. She uses the hashtag #SingleMomStrong on every other post. In 2023, the Burlington Women's Business Network gave her a small bronze plaque for perseverance. She framed it. She showed it to me at Thanksgiving. She made me hold it in a picture. I smiled because I had been smiling for her in pictures my entire life. That is the woman the world sees. A woman who was widowed by abandonment, who built a life from nothing, who raised a daughter without help. The other woman, the one who walked into that lawyer's office in October 2025, I had only seen pieces of. Like a coat you find in a closet you don't remember owning. You know it's yours. You don't know how it got there. A month before that meeting, on a Tuesday in September, my receptionist transferred a call to my office. I was wrist deep in a Labrador retriever named Buster. I told her I'd call back. She told me, in a voice I'd never heard her use, "I think you want this one now." I picked up the phone. The man on the other end said, "Dr. Mercer, my name is Daniel Hollister. I'm an estate attorney in Augusta, Maine. I'm calling to inform you that your father, Werner Mercer, passed away yesterday afternoon. He has named you the sole beneficiary of his estate. I would like to invite you to his funeral on Saturday." I did not say anything for a very long time. Then I said, "I don't have a father." Mr. Hollister said very kindly, "Ma'am, you did. He just died. I'm sorry. I called my mother. I told her." I waited for her to say something a mother would say. She said, "He doesn't deserve your tears. Don't go to that funeral. Don't give him that." I drove to Maine the next morning. There were 15 people at the graveside in Hallowell. I knew none of them. The cemetery was small, and the wind was sharp, and the casket was plain pine. The man in front of it, the man my mother had told me was incapable of love, had built it himself, the lawyer told me later, 2 years before he was sick. A woman in her 60s stood at the edge of the crowd, long gray braid, a coat the color of moss. She watched me the whole service. When it ended, she walked over. She did not touch me. She said, "I'm your aunt. My name is Marina. I tried to know you. I'm so sorry I couldn't." I did not have time to answer. My mother had driven from Vermont without telling me. She came around the line of cars like a storm rolling in. She put her hand on my elbow. She said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Get away from my daughter. You are not welcome here. None of you are." She walked me to my car. She drove me home herself in my car, in my front seat, holding the wheel. She kept her right hand on my knee the whole way back to Vermont. She was smiling. "I want to tell you what I remember from being 4 years old, because everything that came later began there. I remember being behind a couch. The couch was green. The fabric scratched my cheek. I had a stuffed elephant in my hand. I remember a duffel bag on the floor by the front door. I remember my father's boots. I remember my mother's voice, very calm, very quiet, the way she got when she was about to win something, saying, "You will never see her again, Werner. Do you understand me?" Never. I remember my father's voice. He said, "Joan, please." That was the last thing I ever heard him say. A judge I would never meet signed an order 1 week later. Sole custody to my mother. A restraining order requiring my father to stay 100 yards from me. Visitation. None. For 28 years, I would not know that my mother had walked into that courthouse and sworn to a series of sentences she had written in the back of a notebook the week before. I would not know that the only thing in those sentences that was true was my name. When I was 7 years old, a Tuesday in early November, a woman knocked on our front door. She had a long gray braid even then. She was holding a small wrapped present. I was watching from the staircase. I remember the wrapping paper had moons on it. The woman said, "Joan, please, just 5 minutes with her. I brought her a birthday present." My mother said, "Step off my porch or I'm calling the police." The woman said, "Joan." My mother said, "I will say she touched her." The woman left. My mother called the police anyway. She told them a long story while I sat in the kitchen with a juice box. I did not understand any of it. I understood the words crazy and stalking and my daughter. That night, my mother sat down on my bed. She brushed my hair the way she did when she wanted me to listen. She said, "That woman is dangerous, Brinny. Her brother, your father, taught her to find us. They want to take you. If you ever see her again, you run. You don't talk to her. Do you understand?" I nodded. She said, "Good girl." When I was 9, I came home from school crying because a girl in my class had asked if my dad was dead. I did not know how to answer her. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table. She poured me a glass of milk. She put a hand over mine. She said very softly, "Brinny, the honest answer is that he is dead to us. People die in different ways. Some die in hospitals, some choose to be gone. He chose. That is the answer you give from now on. He chose to leave us, and so he is dead to us." I told that to the girl the next morning. She nodded and said, "I'm sorry." I felt grown up. I felt brave. I felt like my mother had given me a sentence I could use as armor. I would use it for the next 23 years. When I was 12, I asked if I had grandparents. My mother said his parents had disowned him before I was born. She said it without looking up from her crossword. She said it the way you tell a child a flavor of ice cream is sold out. There was no opening in the sentence. There was no door. When I was 13, the school sent home a family tree project. I was supposed to fill in the names of my grandparents on both sides. My mother sat at the table and dictated the names on her side and wrote "deceased" in capital letters in both boxes on my father's side. She handed it back to me. She said, "Bring it back tomorrow with my signature." I asked her if I could ask my father what his parents' names had been, just for the project. She did not look up. She said, "If you put one word about your father on that page, you will not be coming to my sister's lake house this summer." I turned the project in with my mother's deceased grandparents and an empty father column. The teacher pulled me aside and asked gently if I was okay. I said yes. I was 13. I had been answering that question yes for 9 years already. When I was 16, I was looking for my mother's checkbook to pay the pizza guy. I opened the drawer in her nightstand. Under a stack of bills, there was a small Polaroid. The picture was of a baby with a tuft of brown hair laughing in a pair of arms. The arms were not my mother's. The arms were strong, with a watch I had never seen. I turned the picture over. The back was written in a hand that was not my mother's. It said, "Werner and Bryn, 9 months. Hallowell, Maine, May 1994. I had been to my mother's nightstand 1,000 times. The picture had been there all along. I took it downstairs. I asked her where it came from. She did not answer for a long second. Then she walked to the kitchen. She turned on the tap. She put the picture in the basin. She lit the corner with the long stem lighter she used for candles. She watched the picture burn. She watched it until the basin was wet ash. She did not look at me once. For 2 days, she did not speak to me. On the 3rd day, she said, "Bryn, that chapter is closed. If you open it again, you will close it alone." I never spoke about my father in that house again. When I was 18, in May 2011, I sat at our kitchen table to sign federal student loan paperwork for college. My mother sat across from me with a glass of white wine. She said, "Your father set up nothing for you, nothing." That is the kind of man he was. "Don't romanticize a ghost," I signed. I would not know until October 14th, 2025, that on the exact afternoon I signed those loan papers, my mother had walked into a branch of First Vermont Bank in Burlington, presented a sheet of paper bearing what looked like my signature, and walked out with $280,000. I would not know that the signature was hers. After the funeral, I drove the 4.5 hours back to Stowe, in silence with my mother in the passenger seat. She did not let me drop her at her apartment. She came up to mine. She slept on the couch. She was suddenly, almost feverishly, my mother again. She called 3 times a day for 2 weeks. Have you heard from that lawyer? Did he send anything in the mail? We need to be ready for them, Bryn. People come out of the woodwork when a man like that dies. You and me will fight as a family. You sign nothing without me. She came up to Stowe the next weekend. She cooked. She filled my freezer. She talked about wills. She had been reading up, she said. She used phrases like rightful heir and morally entitled and 28 years of unpaid labor. She did not say your father once. She said the deceased. She wore earrings I had never seen before, tiny diamond studs. She wore a manicure I had never seen before, French tips, fresh. She wore a new watch, rose gold. The kind of watch a woman buys for herself the week after she comes into a sum she has not earned. She said when I asked that she'd gotten a comp weekend at Mohegan Sun the previous month. Her player card had been upgraded to platinum. Just for being a regular, she said. It's silly, it's nothing. I did not know yet what that meant. I knew there was something wrong with the size of it. The way she said it, the way she watched me when she said it. She was not consoling a grieving daughter. She was auditioning a daughter for the role of a courier. On the Saturday morning of that weekend, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on my counter. The text on the lock screen was from a contact saved as Henry Hallowell. It said, Joan, the funeral was small. I'm old. I would like to know my granddaughter before I die. Please. She must have been ignoring him for weeks. She came out of the shower in a towel, and she saw me looking at the phone. She picked it up. She blocked the number in front of me. She said, he confused me with someone else. That happens at his age. She did not even bother to make it sound true. She made me waffles after that. She put extra blueberries on mine. She kissed the top of my head before she set the plate down. She said, sweetheart, we are about to be very, very comfortable, you and me, after all we've been through. Can you imagine? I could imagine it. I did not say so. I cut a square out of my waffle. I chewed it. I did not taste it. One night while she slept, I sat at my kitchen island and I typed Werner Mercer obituary into Google. The obituary was in the Kennebec Journal. It was short. It said he had been a master carpenter. It said he had founded Mercer Woodworks in Augusta in 1998. It said his hobbies had been wood turning and watching the lake from his porch. It said, Werner is survived by his daughter, Dr. Bryn Mercer, of Stowe, Vermont, his sister, Marina Mercer, of Hallowell, and his parents, Henry and Edith Mercer, of Hallowell. His parents were alive. I had grandparents, 2 of them. They were alive. I was 32 years old and I had grandparents I had never met. And I had a mother who had told me that for 28 years. I went into my supply closet at the clinic and I closed the door and I cried for 10 minutes. I cleaned my face, I went back out and I gave a beagle his anti-inflammatory. The next morning, Mr. Hollister called the clinic again. He asked me to come to Augusta on October 14th for the formal reading of the will. He said very quietly, Dr. Mercer, Your mother has been calling my office several times a day. I would like to ask you to come the day before. There are things I need to discuss with you alone before." I said yes. I did not tell my mother. On the morning of October 13th, at 5:30 in the morning, she knocked on my apartment door. She had a small overnight bag and her purse and her coat. She said, "I'm driving you. We'll go together. As a family." She did not phrase it as a question. I let her in. I let her drive. I told myself it would be worse to fight her in the parking lot than to ride out the 4 hours. She booked one room at the Senator Inn in Augusta, 2 queen beds. She fell asleep before I did. She slept the way she always slept, flat on her back, mouth slightly open, hands folded on her chest, like someone practicing for a casket. I lay awake. I watched the ceiling. I watched the digital clock turn from 11:47 to 12 to 1. I was about to walk into a lawyer's office the next morning, expecting a fight over an inheritance my mother believed she deserved. I had no idea I was walking into the morning that would end every story I had been told about who my parents were. We arrived at Hollister and Pratt at 9 o'clock sharp. My mother wore a black wool coat and a pearl necklace I had never seen on her. Single mom soldier mode, battle dress. She walked through the door ahead of me and shook Mr. Hollister's hand like a general greeting a captured officer. Mr. Hollister was 62. Gray hair, gray suit, kind eyes, very still hands. He gestured to the conference room. He said, "Dr. Mercer, before we begin, may I speak with you for a moment alone?" My mother put her hand on the small of my back, hard. She said, "She is my daughter. Whatever you say to her, you say to both of us." Mr. Hollister did not move. He said calmly, "Mrs. Mercer, your daughter is the sole named beneficiary of this estate. By law, this meeting is for her. I am offering you a courtesy." The smile that came across my mother's face was not friendly. It was the smile of a woman who has been preparing for an audition for 28 years and has finally been called to the stage. She sat down. She took her coat off slowly. She folded it across her lap. She looked at Mr. Hollister. "Mr. Hollister," she said, 28 years ago, the man whose estate sits in that folder walked away from his 4-year-old daughter without a phone call and without a check. I raised this girl. I worked 2 jobs. I lost my own youth. I did it alone. So before you start reading whatever last little tantrum he wrote, I want you to understand something. Whatever is in that estate, it is mine. It is moral restitution. I am her mother. Anything she receives, she will be transferring to me. And Bryn," she turned to me, "if you cross me on this in any way, you understand that you no longer have a mother. I will cut you out. I will block your number. I will deny I ever had a daughter. Do you understand me?" I nodded. I did not argue. I did not cry. I just nodded. Mr. Hollister waited a full 10 seconds in silence. He looked at me. He looked at my mother. He folded his hands. He said, "Mrs. Mercer, before I open this folder, I need you to know that everything I'm about to share, Werner Mercer left explicit written instructions to share with you in the room. He wanted you to hear it from him." He opened the folder. He slid a single letter across the desk. Cream paper, handwritten, 2 pages, single-spaced. The first line was visible from where my mother was sitting. Joni, by the time you read this, I am gone. Everything I'm about to say, you already know. My mother's hand went to her throat. She made a sound, not a word, a sound. And she sank back into her chair. She knew the handwriting. She knew what was coming. Her face went the color of the paper. The lawyer had not said another word. He did not need to. Mr. Hollister picked up the letter. He cleared his throat once. He began to read. Joni, by the time you read this, I am gone. Everything I'm about to say, you already know. I'm not writing it for you. I'm writing it for our daughter, who is sitting in this room because you have insisted on being here. So I will be brief and I will be clear. My mother said, "Stop, Mr. Hollister, you can't." Mr. Hollister raised one hand without lifting his eyes. He said, "Mrs. Mercer, you are free to leave this room at any time. You are not free to interrupt the reading. Your husband, your ex-husband, was very specific." "Bryn," I said. "Mom, let him finish." She did not finish her sentence. She did not move. Her eyes stayed on the page. Mr. Hollister continued. "Bryn, I did not abandon you. You and I both know this, Joni. And you have spent the last 28 years working to make sure our daughter never knew. So let me start there. In the fall of 1996, I came home from a long job in Bangor and found a letter in our daughter's drawer. The letter was not for me. It was from a man named Gerald Rossman. You had been writing to him for several months. When I asked you, you told me the truth. And then you told me that if I left, I would never see Bryn again. I asked you to come to counseling. I asked you to think about our daughter. You laughed at me, Joni. I am writing this 28 years later, and I can still hear the way you laughed. I looked at my mother. Her hands were very still in her lap. She was not crying. She was calculating. I could see her eyes move the way they used to move at the dinner table when a guest asked her a hard question. Measuring, testing, looking for the seam in the wall, Mr. Hollister continued. 2 months later, in February 1997, you filed for sole custody and a restraining order. You told the court that I had emotionally abused Bryn. You told the court that I had threatened you. None of it was true. You also knew, Joni, that if I fought you, if I demanded a trial, Bryn would be brought in. She was 4. I had watched my own parents fight in front of me when I was 6. I would not do that to her. I let you have her. I let you have the story. I left. My mother said very quietly, "He was sick at the end. Dementia, he was confused. Whoever this is, it isn't him," Mr. Hollister said without looking up. "Mrs. Mercer, Werner had pancreatic cancer. His cognition was unaffected. His treating physician at Maine General is on speed dial in this office. Please continue listening." He read on. "I moved to Maine. I built a shop. I never remarried. I wrote Bryn a letter on every birthday and every Christmas and every milestone I could find. I built her a small thing of wood with each letter. I sent them to the only address I had, the address you used to file for divorce. Everyone came back marked refused. I knew it was you. I asked Mr. Hollister to keep them all, because I believed there would come a day when she could read them. By the time you are reading this, That box contains 243 letters. I did not breathe. Mr. Hollister set the page down. He picked up the second page. In November 2005, when Bryn was 12, I opened a UTMA trust at First Vermont Bank in Burlington, in her name, for the purpose of her college education. I opened it with $200,000 from the sale of my first workshop, then added $5,000 every year through 2011. By May of 2011, when Bryn turned 18, the balance was $282,400. My mother stood up. "This is," Mr. Hollister kept reading. His voice did not change. On May 17th, 2011, the same week Bryn graduated from high school, someone walked into the Burlington branch of First Vermont Bank with what appeared to be a notarized signature in Bryn's name, requesting the full liquidation of the account. The bank processed the request. The funds were wired to a personal account belonging to Joan Mercer. I learned of this in March of this year. I retained Smith and Hayes Forensic Accounting of Boston in April. They completed a 24-page report in June. A copy is in this file. A copy is with the Vermont State's Attorney. A copy is with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My mother sat back down. Slowly. Her face was not pale anymore. Her face had gone smooth, empty, the way it used to go when she lost at Scrabble. A face that was already moving to the next move on the next board. "Mr. Hollister," she said, "I would like to speak with my daughter privately for one moment." I said, "Sit down, Mom." I did not raise my voice. I did not look at her. I said it the way you say no to a dog that has put its paws on the table. She sat down. Mr. Hollister opened the second folder. He slid a thick bound document across the desk to me. The cover read, "Smith and Hayes, Forensic Accounting LLC, in the matter of the UTMA Trust of Bryn Mercer, June 2025. I opened it. The first page was a photocopy of a single bank form. The form was dated May 17th, 2011. It was a withdrawal request from First Vermont Bank. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be mine. I knew it was not mine because the B looped too wide. I had been signing my name a certain way since I was 9. The B is small and tight, the rest is loose. This B was open and round and confident, the way my mother's B was. I had watched her sign checks my whole childhood. I had been paying down a federal student loan for the last 5 years, on a debt I would not have had if my own mother had not stolen $280,000 from a trust my dead father had built for me before I was old enough to know it existed. If you have been listening this far, if your hands are shaking the way mine were, pause this for 1 second and tell me in the comments what you think was in the next folder. Because Mr. Hollister had 3 folders on the desk that morning. We had only opened one. Mr. Hollister opened the 3rd folder. I want to tell you about the forensic report for a moment, because the part that broke something in me was not the dollar amount. The dollar amount was abstract. The part that broke something in me was the tab on page 11 labeled Beneficiary's Knowledge of Account. I opened it. The page had a chart. It had a column labeled Withdrawal Date. Another column labeled Amount. A 3rd column labeled Transferred To. A 4th column labeled date beneficiary notified of withdrawal. The fourth column had one entry on every row. It said the same thing every time. The beneficiary was never notified. $280,000, 64 transactions across 38 months. The beneficiary was never notified. The beneficiary was never notified. The beneficiary was never notified. The beneficiary was me. I had been the beneficiary of $280,000 while I was filling out a financial aid form at a public library in Burlington at 17. I had been the beneficiary of $280,000 while I was eating ramen for a week in college because my book money had run out. I had been the beneficiary of $280,000 while I was driving home from a double shift at 26, doing math in my head about whether I could afford to fix the alternator in my Subaru. I put the report down. I closed the cover. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her hands. Mr. Hollister waited a moment. He set the report aside, gently like a serving plate. He took out 14 envelopes. He stacked them in front of me. He said, "Bryn, your father instructed me, in the last week of his life, to select 14 of these letters for you. He said you would not be able to read all 243 in one sitting. He said these were the ones he most wanted you to read first. They are labeled." I touched the top one. The label, in a teacher-careful hand that was not Mr. Hollister's, said, "8th birthday." I opened it. Inside, on a folded piece of cream paper, were 3 sentences. There was also a small carved wooden horse. The horse was the size of my thumb. The paper said, "Happy birthday, Brinny. I hope a horse made of pine is okay until I can take you to a real one. Daddy?" I made a sound. I did not know I had made it until Mr. Hollister handed me a tissue. My mother was watching the horse the way you would watch a knife on a kitchen counter. She said, "He was abusive." The court agreed. There is a restraining order on record. None of this is admissible. Mr. Hollister said, "Mrs. Mercer, I anticipated you would say that." He slid a third document. He said, "This is a sworn affidavit from Marina Mercer, your former sister-in-law, the woman you named in a 2000 civil stalking complaint that was based on a sworn statement you signed before a Vermont judge. The affidavit explains that Ms. Mercer was driving to your address in Burlington to deliver a birthday present to her 7-year-old niece. The complaint alleges that she attempted to abduct her niece. There is no evidence of any such attempt because no such attempt occurred. We have additionally," he slid another sheet, "an audio recording. In March of this year, a freelance journalist named Anne-Marie Kessler interviewed you on the record for a planned local feature on, quote, single mom heroes. The interview ran 94 minutes. At the 71-minute mark, you described on the record having, quote, filed a fake restraining order on his sister to keep her from contradicting my story to my daughter," end quote. Ms. Kessler did not run the piece. She sent the recording to me last month. Marina recognized her own name when the recording came in. She is in the next room. My mother went white. The door behind us opened. Marina Mercer walked in. She did not look at my mother. She looked at me. She sat down across from me. She slid a worn cloth photo album across the conference table. She said, "I tried. In 2000, I haven't stopped. The album was the color of a robin's egg. It had a small embroidered M on the front that had been redone with darker thread where it had worn. She had been carrying it a long time. I opened it. The first page was a copy of a hospital bracelet. Baby Girl Mercer, August 20th, 1993, 6 pounds, 11 ounces. Underneath, in her careful teacher handwriting, Bryn, the morning she came home, photographed by Werner. Page 2 was a baby in a wooden cradle. The cradle was beautiful. The caption said, "Cradle built by Werner. 3 months." The pages went on. Each one had a photo. Each one had a date. Each one had a small, careful caption written in the hand of a woman who had spent her career grading other people's sentences. Page 9. A photograph of me at 5, standing on the front lawn in Burlington, in a costume my mother had made for a school parade. I had no memory of who had taken the picture. The caption said, "Long-distance photo. Werner asked a private investigator to take this from the corner of the block. Pre-Joan restraining order. June 1998. Page 16. Me at 11, on the steps of my middle school. 8th grade orientation photo, Werner, clipped from the school newsletter. Page 22. Me, at 14, leaving the post office in Burlington with a small package in my hand. The caption said, "Bryn picks up her own birthday card from the post office. She does not know it is from Werner. She does not know it is from anyone." Werner watched from the bakery across the street and went home. I looked up at Marina. She was looking at me the way you look at a person you have been carrying in your pocket for 25 years. I turned the page. Page 25 was the inside of a high school auditorium. The shot was taken from the back row. A girl in a navy gown was crossing the stage. I was the girl. The caption said, "Bryn graduates Burlington High." Werner watched the live stream from a parking lot 2 miles away. He cried in his truck and did not start the engine for an hour. June 2011. Page 28 was a Christmas card I had no memory of receiving. The handwriting on the envelope was Werner's. The address was correct. The stamp had been canceled. There was a red "refused" across the front in handwriting I knew well. I had spent the first 18 years of my life looking at that handwriting on permission slips and pediatrician forms and notes in my school lunches. It was my mother's hand. The caption underneath said, "Werner's Christmas card, 2009, returned by Joan 11 days after he mailed it." Page 30 was a photograph of a small wooden cradle. The cradle had a heart carved on the headboard. The caption said, "The cradle Werner built for Bryn the night she was born. He sanded it for 3 weeks. Joan threw it out the same day she changed the locks." Page 31 was a photograph dated May 9th, 2020. The Tufts University commencement. I was walking across the stage. The photo was taken from outside the venue. There was an overflow broadcast on the lawn. In the foreground, with his back to the camera, was a man in a brown jacket. He had a bouquet of yellow lilies in his hand. He was not looking at the camera. He was looking at the screen. The caption said, "Werner watched Bryn graduate from veterinary school. He was not allowed to approach. He stood there for 90 minutes. He left the flowers in the parking lot for a stranger to find." I said very quietly, He was at my graduation, Marina said. He was at everyone he could find. He had a rule: he would not approach. He would not interfere. He just wanted to see you alive. My mother said, in the voice of a woman trying for the last available exit, This is emotional manipulation. He was..." Mr. Hollister cut her off. His voice was different now. It was the voice of a man who had been waiting to use a certain tone for a very long time. "Mrs. Mercer, you took out a restraining order against your husband in 1997 by submitting an affidavit you knew to be false. You took out a civil stalking order against your sister-in-law in 2000 the same way. In May of 2011, you drained a custodial education trust by forging your 18-year-old daughter's signature on a bank withdrawal form. Between May of 2011 and October of 2014, you used those funds to settle $235,000 in gambling debts to Mohegan Sun, Bovada, and Bet Online. And that was not the only money. From 1997 until Bryn turned 18, Werner Mercer paid court-ordered child support every month. After that, he kept sending checks voluntarily. Not because a court forced him to, but because you kept telling him Bryn needed help. Tuition, books, medical bills, car repairs, rent. Every check was marked for her. Every check went through you. Over 28 years, between court-ordered support and voluntary payments, Werner sent more than $400,000 for his daughter, and Bryn never saw it. She was paying her own student loans, while you were cashing checks from the man you taught her to hate. He paused. He said, "Mrs. Mercer, your daughter was paying $1,250 a month in the student loan payments at one point in 2022. Did you know that?" My mother did not answer. I said, "Mom, did you know?" She did not look at me. I said, "No." She closed her eyes. She nodded. Out loud, she said the word, "Yes." That was the first true word my mother had said to me in 28 years. I felt nothing. Then she opened her eyes and she changed strategies. She put a hand to her chest. She tilted her head. The voice she used next was not the voice of the woman who had threatened to disown me 40 minutes ago. It was a softer voice, an opening voice, the voice she used on neighbors who brought casseroles. I had heard her practice this voice on me my whole life. "Brinny," she said, "I was sick. I had a gambling problem. I needed help. Your father, he had so much money. He had so much. What was the difference if I took some? It went to raise you in the end. It went to your school clothes. It went to summer camp. He owed us, Bryn. He left us. What was the difference?" I said, "It went to a casino, Mom." She said, "Brinny, I can pay every cent back. We don't need any of this. We don't need the police. We don't need lawyers. We don't need an investigation. We are family. I'm your mother." Mr. Hollister said, "Mrs. Mercer." She kept going. The tears had arrived now. They were on cue, and they were small and well-managed. The way she had cried at her own father's funeral when she could feel the room watching. I knew those tears. I had been watching them my whole life. I had watched them when a neighbor caught her shoplifting a candle from a Christmas market when I was 9, and she had pulled me close and explained to the woman that she had been distracted because she had lost her husband, and the woman had stopped pressing charges and given her the candle for free. I had watched them when she had been pulled over for speeding on the highway to Boston when I was 15, and the trooper had let her off with a warning after she explained, very softly, that she was driving her daughter back from a college visit, and her late husband had loved that school, and she was just trying to honor him. I had watched them at PTA meetings and parent-teacher conferences and the front desk of a hospital where she once needed an antibiotic and had no insurance card. The tears were a tool. The tool worked. The tool had been working on adults for 40 years and on me for 28. Mr. Hollister had clearly seen tears before. He waited until she paused for breath. Then he said, "Mrs. Mercer, I would like to inform you that the local police were informed of the contents of this case in June of this year by your late ex-husband. The Vermont State's attorney has been working in coordination with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, given the interstate movement of funds. As we speak, Mrs. Mercer, federal agents are at your apartment in Burlington executing a search warrant. Your assets were frozen at 9 o'clock this morning. You will be taken into custody today. I was specifically instructed by the state's attorney's office not to share this with you in advance, in case you attempted to flee." She stopped crying. Her hand went to her purse, instinctively. Then she stopped it. She put the hand back in her lap. Her face went smooth again. She was calculating one more time. Marina spoke, very low. She did not raise her voice once during the entire meeting. She said, "Joni, the truth was always going to come out. Werner waited as long as he did because he didn't want it to come from him. He wanted it to come from a lawyer in front of the daughter who deserved to know." I turned to Marina. I said, "Did he ever stop loving me?" She said, "Sweetheart, he loved you so much he refused to drag a 4-year-old through a courtroom even when it cost him his daughter. He loved you when you didn't know his name. He loved you on every single one of your birthdays. He loved you in a hospital room in September while a nurse held a phone above his face and tried to get him to record one more video that would never reach you in time." I turned to my mother. I said, "I want to know what you wrote on the back of every photograph you kept hidden in your bedroom." She blinked. She said, "What?" I said, "There was a Polaroid I found when I was 16. The back said, Werner and Bryn, May 1994. That was his handwriting, not yours. I watched you burn it in the kitchen sink. Why did you keep that picture for 16 years before burning it?" She did not answer. I said, "Tell me, Mom." She finally said, "Because I loved him too. Before all of it. And I wanted to keep one thing about who we were." I said, "You wanted to keep him to yourself, while telling me he didn't exist." She nodded. I said, "There was also a small wooden bird on top of my dresser when I was little, 3 inches tall, painted blue and gray. I asked you when I was 6 where it came from. You told me you bought it at a craft fair. When I was 9, it disappeared. You told me you accidentally donated it. Did he carve it?" She did not answer. I said, "Mom, did he carve it?" She said very quietly, "Yes." I said, "What else of his did I have that you took away when I started to love it?" She said, "Bryn." I said, "What else?" She closed her eyes. She said the list out loud. She said it the way a child says a recitation. She said, "A music box he sent the first Christmas after he left. You were 5. I let you have it for one afternoon. I put it on top of the refrigerator after you went to bed. I donated it the next morning. A wooden frame for your kindergarten school photo. You used it until you were 7. I told you the dog had broken it. We didn't have a dog. A small carved bear he sent for your 10th birthday. I burned it in the fireplace in February of that year. I told you we were burning a piece of pine wood that was making the house smell wrong. A set of 3 carved birds you found in a basement box when you were 11. You set them on your windowsill. They were gone in 2 weeks. I told you the cleaning lady had thrown them out. She kept going. The list was 4 minutes long. I did not interrupt her. I let her say all of it. I had been watching for the things in my childhood that did not have explanations my whole life, and now, in a conference room in Augusta, the explanations were arriving at me in a flat, steady voice, and they were filling the room. When she was done, I said, "Are there more?" She said, "Yes." I said, "How many?" She said, "I don't remember. Dozens." I stood up. I walked to the window. The October sun was on Augusta, and the leaves on State Street were yellow and red, and the courthouse looked very small from up there. I said, without turning around, "Mr. Hollister, is there anything else?" He said, "2 things, Dr. Mercer. The will, and one item your father asked me to give you personally." I turned around. I had not cried yet. I would not cry until the next thing happened. Mr. Hollister read the will. It was short. It was clean. It said, "I, Werner Henry Mercer, being of sound mind, leave the entirety of my estate to my daughter, Dr. Bryn Mercer of Stowe, Vermont. The estate includes my residence at 14 Lakeside Road, Hallowell, Maine, the property and equipment of Mercer Woodworks at 22 Water Street, Augusta, Maine, the contents of First Federal Savings Account number ending 0231, currently holding $220,000, all return correspondence held by my counsel, Mr. Daniel Hollister, and all personal effects, photographs, and recordings. I leave no other person any property, claim, or right against this estate." My mother whispered, 28 years. She was not crying anymore. The performance was over. She was sitting very still. She was looking at her hands. Mr. Hollister stood up. He walked to a small cabinet behind his desk. He opened it. He took out a wooden box. The box was about the size of a hardback book. The wood was dark, walnut, oiled, smooth. The hinges were brass. The lid had a small inlay of a river, a single curving line of lighter wood across the top, like a ribbon. He set it gently in front of me. He said, "Dr. Mercer, your father worked on this for the last 6 months of his life. He said it had to be ready before he was gone. He said, and I am quoting him, 'Tell her not to open it until she knows.'" I said, "Until I know what?" He said he didn't say. He said you would know when. Outside the office, I heard a car door close. Then another. Then a third. Footsteps on the wooden stairs. The murmur of a Vermont State Police uniform. A federal jacket. A voice saying, "Yes, sir, this is the right floor." My mother turned her head toward the door. There was a knock. Mr. Hollister opened it. 2 state troopers and a man in an FBI jacket walked into the conference room. The taller trooper said very politely, "Joan Patricia Mercer, you are under arrest. The charges are grand larceny, forgery, wire fraud, and perjury. before a Vermont family court. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. I did not look at my mother. I picked up the wooden box. I set it on my knees. I looked at Marina. Marina said, "He told me the last time he could speak. He said, 'Tell her she was always wanted. Tell her she was always wanted.'" I turned the small brass key in the front of the box. The lid opened. A song began to play. Moon River, slow, faint, perfect. 8 chimed notes in a row. Then the second phrase. Then the song winding through its tiny brass cylinder, the way it had been wound 100 times in a Maine workshop by a man with cancer trying to get the spring tension right. I looked up at my mother. She was being walked to the door in handcuffs. She had not heard the song yet. The second she heard the second bar, the second she heard the way it lifted on the word wider, her face dropped. 28 years of practice fell off her face in 3 seconds. The smile, the soldier mode, the calculating shimmer, the curated tears, the rehearsed pivots, the entire architecture of who she had been since 1996, gone. Underneath was a woman I had never seen. Her knees buckled. The trooper caught her by the elbow. She did not stand back up under her own weight. She said, "Werner," just the name. Then she said it again. "Werner, Werner," like she was trying to remember a phone number from a long time ago. She started to cry. These were not the practiced tears. These were not the tears she used at funerals or in arguments. These were the tears of a woman who had heard for the first time in 28 years the voice of the person she had been before she destroyed her own life. She said, "He kept that song." I said, "He kept everything, Mom." She said, "It was the night it was at our engagement. We were under that tree. I sang that to him." I said, "I know." She said, "I haven't sung in 20 years. Maybe 25. I said, "I know that too. I had grown up in a house with no music." My mother turned the radio off when I turned it on. She had told me she didn't like noise. She had told me singers were performative. She had told me on her birthday once when I was 8, and I tried to sing to her with a candle, that I had a thin voice and should not push it. I had not sung since I was 8. 24 years. I had not understood until that moment that she had been protecting herself from a song, a specific song, a song she had given a man at the moment she had been young enough to mean it, a song he had been listening to in his head while he carved a box for her daughter on a workbench in Maine for the last 6 months of his life. She had silenced an entire house for 25 years, rather than risk hearing it on a radio at a grocery store. She bent at the waist. The trooper let her bend. She said, in the smallest voice I had ever heard her use, "Brinny, please." I said, "Don't call me that." "He called me that. He earned it." She said, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I said, "I believe you." Then I said, "And it is not enough." She did not answer. I said, "Goodbye, Mom." The troopers walked her to the door. She turned her head back twice. The song was still playing. It would play for 45 more seconds. I let it. If you have been listening, really listening, and you have ever sat across from a parent whose love came with conditions, or whose version of the past you have only now started to suspect, drop one word in the comments. Just one. The word you would say to your younger self if you could go back and tell her the truth nobody else was going to tell her. Mine was wanted. 6 months later, I am writing this from a porch in Hallowell, Maine. I live in my father's house now. It is a small clapboard house on a hill above a lake. The porch faces west. The screen door has a wooden frame he built himself. The kitchen has a small bench with a single carved horse on the windowsill. The horse from the 8th birthday letter. I keep it where I can see it from the sink. The first night I slept in the house, I could not sleep. I sat in the reading chair in the corner of the bedroom, and I looked at the small details of the room a man had lived in for 27 years. The water glass on the bedside table, the reading lamp angled exactly to fall on a paperback, the slippers under the bed, worn down at the heels in the exact pattern of his feet. A man had been a person here. He had stood at this window. He had pulled this blanket up. He had set down a coffee cup on this dresser and left a faint ring on the wood that I will never sand off. Marina lives 12 minutes away. She comes for dinner 3 nights a week. We have started a slow project together, going through the 243 letters in chronological order. We open one each Sunday afternoon at her kitchen table. She makes coffee. I make sandwiches. Sometimes we read in silence. Sometimes she remembers a small story to add. Sometimes we just look at the carved object that came with the letter, and we set it down between us, and we do not say anything at all. My grandparents, Henry and Edith Mercer, 88 and 86, come on Sundays. My grandmother made me a quilt with my name on it. She made it the week she learned I existed in her own granddaughter sense, not in a frame on a shelf sense. She is small and sharp, and she calls me ours. My grandfather, who was a high school baseball coach for 36 years, asks me a different small question every Sunday about my work. He listens to the answer the way you listen to a song you have wanted to hear your whole life. The first Sunday, he hugged me. He held on for so long that my grandmother had to gently put her hand on his shoulder to remind him I was a real person and could be hugged for a normal amount of time. I took over Mercer Woodworks with a foreman the lawyer recommended. I paid off the last $60,000 of my student loans with a savings account from my father's estate. I used another $50,000 to start the Werner Mercer Scholarship for first-generation veterinary students at Tufts. 2 students received it last spring. My mother pleaded out, "She is serving 8 years in federal prison. The $280,000 was returned from her frozen assets. She has written me 104 letters since her arraignment. I do not open them. I send them back in the envelope they came in, sealed, marked return to sender, in handwriting that is the same as her own forged signature. I learned the loop from her. The 243 letters my father wrote me sit on a shelf above his reading chair organized by date. I read one each Sunday. Some make me laugh. Some make me put the letter down and step outside. The music box sits on the windowsill in the kitchen. On clear nights when I open the window, the breeze sometimes catches the lid and lets a single note out. I never close it quickly. I let the note finish. I am 32 years old. I have grandparents who are 88 and 86, and they made me a quilt with my name on it. I have an aunt who has been waiting for me since I was 7. I have a father who never stopped writing. And I have a mother, a woman who used to be my mother, who I am letting go of. Gently, the way you set down a stone you have been carrying for so long you forgot you were the one who picked it up.